You wake up every morning with a mind already in motion. Thoughts rush in before your feet touch the floor. Some of them are small and shallow, consumed with comfort, entertainment, approval, fear of people, fear of failure. Others are heavy and dark, accusing you, reminding you of past sins, past mistakes, past defeats. And if you are honest, most days you simply let those thoughts run free. You let them govern your emotions, your decisions, your direction. You live at the level of your thoughts, and that is why so many live weak, distracted, and defeated lives. Not because they lack opportunity, not because they lack resources, but because they have never learned that the battlefield is the mind, and that every day demands a deliberate war for the elevation of your thoughts. You cannot rise above what you consistently think about. A mind fixed on trivial things will produce a trivial life. A mind consumed with self will produce a shallow and fragile soul. You can dress well, speak well, and appear strong on the outside, but if your thoughts are low, your life will never rise. The greatest danger is not persecution or hardship or opposition. The greatest danger is a small mind that never looks beyond itself, never reaches upward, never trembles at truth, never bows before what is eternal and weighty. You are not created to drift through life guided by impulse and emotion. You are created to think, to discern, to set your mind on things that are higher than your immediate desires and fears. Most people want their circumstances to change, but they refuse to confront their thoughts. They pray for relief while feeding their minds with garbage. They ask for strength while meditating on weakness. They want peace while rehearsing anxiety again and again. Understand this clearly. What you continually dwell on will eventually define you. If you constantly revisit offense, you will become bitter. If you constantly imagine failure, you will live timidly. If you constantly exalt yourself in your thoughts, you will eventually collapse under the weight of your own pride. The mind is not neutral territory. It is either being shaped by truth or deformed by lies. You must take responsibility for what occupies your mind. No one else can do this for you. You cannot blame your family, your culture, your past, or your pain. There comes a moment when you must stand before yourself and say, I will not allow my thoughts to run wherever they please. I will discipline my mind. This is not about positive thinking or empty optimism. This is about truth, truth that humbles you, truth that exposes you, truth that lifts your eyes beyond the dust and noise of this world. Elevated thoughts are not lofty fantasies. They are sober, weighty, and demanding. Look at how easily your attention is captured by what is meaningless. Hours vanish in distraction. Your mind is trained to crave stimulation, not depth. You scroll, you consume, you react, but you do not reflect. And then you wonder why your soul feels thin, why you lack endurance, why you cannot stand firm when trials come. A mind constantly entertained will never be strong. A mind addicted to noise will fear silence, because silence forces you to confront what you have avoided. Elevated thinking requires solitude, discipline, and courage. It requires you to step away from the crowd and stand alone with truth. You must learn to think beyond the moment. Most people live imprisoned in the now. What they feel today determines what they believe. What they fear today determines what they attempt. But truth is not governed by your mood. Purpose is not revealed to the impatient. If you want your thoughts to rise, you must learn to ask better questions. Not how do I feel, but what is true. Not what do I want, but what is right. Not how do I avoid pain, but what is worth suffering for. These questions reshape the mind. They tear it away from self-centeredness and anchor it to something greater. There is a seriousness to life that most people refuse to acknowledge. Every decision matters, every thought matters. You are being shaped day by day, thought by thought, into something. You are not standing still. You are either being conformed to what is shallow and temporary or transformed by what is eternal and unchanging. Elevated thoughts come from recognizing the weight of existence. You are alive for a reason, accountable for your choices, responsible for how you live. When your thoughts rise to that level, trivial pursuits begin to lose their power over you. You cannot elevate your thoughts while feeding them lies. Lies about who you are, lies about what matters, lies about where fulfillment is found. The world is full of voices eager to tell you that comfort is the highest good, that happiness is the ultimate goal, that truth is flexible and optional. If you absorb these messages uncritically, your mind will shrink. You will become fragile, easily offended, easily discouraged, easily manipulated. Elevated thinking requires discernment. You must learn to test what you hear, to weigh it, to reject what is false even when it is popular, even when it is convenient. One of the greatest enemies of elevated thought is pride. Pride keeps your mind low even while convincing you that you are enlightened. It resists correction. It despises authority. It refuses to admit weakness. A proud mind is a closed mind, and a closed mind cannot grow. If you want your thoughts to rise, you must cultivate humility. Humility listens. Humility learns. Humility acknowledges that there are truths greater than your opinions and standards higher than your preferences. When humility enters the mind, clarity follows. You must also confront the way you think about yourself. Many are enslaved by constant self-examination that leads not to growth, but to paralysis. Others live in constant self-exaltation, blind to their faults and blind to their need for change. Elevated thinking is neither self-obsessed nor self-deceived. It is honest. It recognizes weakness without surrendering to it. It acknowledges failure without being defined by it. It understands that identity is not built on performance or comparison, but on truth that stands firm regardless of circumstance. Discipline is not a popular word, but without it, your thoughts will never rise. The mind, like the body, drifts toward laziness if left untrained. You must choose what you read, what you listen to, what you watch, and how you spend your time. Every input shapes your thinking. If you fill your mind with anger, you will become angry. If you fill it with lust, you will become enslaved. If you fill it with cynicism, you will lose hope. Elevated thoughts are cultivated through intentional habits practiced day after day, often when you feel no immediate reward. You must also learn to think rightly about suffering. Many allow hardship to shrink their minds, to turn them inward, to make them resentful and fearful. But suffering, when viewed through elevated thought, becomes a refining fire. It strips away illusions. It exposes what you truly trust. It forces you to confront what you believe about meaning and endurance. A shallow mind asks only, how do I escape this? An elevated mind asks, what is being formed in me through this? That question changes everything. Fear is another force that keeps thoughts low. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. Fear narrows the mind until all it can see is the threat in front of it. Elevated thinking does not deny danger, but it refuses to be ruled by it. It places fear in its proper place. It recognizes that a life governed by fear is already defeated. Courage begins in the mind with the decision to value truth and obedience above comfort and safety. You must lift your thoughts beyond the temporary. Everything around you is passing. Success fades. Applause dies out. Possessions break and disappear. If your thoughts are anchored to these things, you will live in constant anxiety, guarding what cannot last. Elevated thinking fixes its gaze on what endures. It evaluates choices in light of their long-term impact, not their immediate pleasure. It understands that sacrifice now can lead to strength later, that discipline today can produce freedom tomorrow. There is also a moral dimension to your thoughts. What you entertain in secret shapes what you do in public. A mind that tolerates compromise will eventually justify it. A mind that flirts with corruption will eventually act on it. Elevated thinking demands integrity at the level of thought. It refuses to make peace with what is destructive. It does not excuse itself by pointing to others. It holds itself to a standard even when no one else is watching. You must be careful what you repeatedly say to yourself. The internal dialogue you maintain can either build resilience or reinforce defeat. If you constantly tell yourself that you are incapable, that change is impossible, that growth is beyond you, you will begin to live as if those lies are true. Elevated thinking confronts those narratives with truth. It does not deny difficulty, but it refuses despair. It understands that transformation is often slow, painful, and demanding, but it is possible. Community also plays a role in shaping your thoughts. Surrounding yourself with shallow, cynical, or reckless people will pull your mind downward no matter how strong you think you are. Conversations shape perspective, influences matter. Elevated thinking seeks fellowship that sharpens, challenges, and corrects. Not flattery, not constant agreement, but honest engagement with truth. You need voices in your life that call you higher when you are tempted to settle lower. You must learn to think in terms of purpose rather than impulse. Impulse reacts, purpose acts. Impulse seeks relief, purpose seeks meaning. When your thoughts are driven by impulse, your life becomes unstable. Elevated thinking asks, why am I doing this? And where is this leading? It resists the urge to make decisions based solely on emotion. It pauses, it reflects, it submits desire to reason and conscience. Do not underestimate the cost of elevating your thoughts. It will require saying no when others say yes. It will require silence when others demand constant expression. It will require endurance when others quit. You will feel misunderstood at times. You will feel alone at times. But a mind that has been lifted by truth is not easily shaken. It stands firm when storms come because it is anchored to something deeper than circumstance. If you continue to think the way you have always thought, you will continue to live the way you have always lived. Change begins not with resolution, but with repentance at the level of thought, turning away from lies, turning away from excuses, turning away from the small, cramped ways of thinking that have kept you bound. Elevated thinking is an act of obedience, a daily decision to align your mind with what is true, good, and worthy. You are not a victim of your thoughts. You are a steward of them. You will answer for how you used your mind, for what you pursued, for what you allowed to shape you. This is not meant to crush you, but to awaken you. You are made for more than mental drift and shallow ambition. You were made to see clearly, to think deeply, to live purposefully. When your thoughts rise, your life will follow, shaped not by passing feelings, but by enduring truth that steadies the soul even when everything else shakes. Your life will never rise above the level of your thoughts, because your thoughts are the soil in which every decision, desire, and action takes root. Before anything is done with the hands, it has already been rehearsed in the mind. Before a direction is chosen, it has been justified internally. People often want to change what they see on the outside while refusing to confront what is happening on the inside, and that refusal guarantees stagnation. A mind that remains small, careless, or corrupted will always pull life downward no matter how great the potential, opportunity, or talent may be present. Every habit you live with today was once a thought you tolerated. Every pattern you regret began as an idea you entertained. Thoughts are never harmless, even when they seem fleeting or insignificant. What you repeatedly allow into your mind shapes your values. dulls or sharpens your conscience, and slowly determines what you believe is normal. Over time, the mind trains the heart, and the heart directs the will. This is why two people can face the same circumstances and live completely different lives, because their thoughts interpret reality differently. One sees challenge as an invitation to grow, the other as proof to give up. One sees discipline as freedom, the other as restriction. One thinks deeply, the other merely reacts. Many people live at the mercy of their emotions because they have never learned to govern their thoughts. They feel anxious, so they assume something must be wrong. They feel discouraged, so they conclude they are failing. They feel unmotivated, so they surrender to inactivity. But emotions are followers, not leaders. They trail behind the thoughts you choose to dwell on. If your mind is constantly rehearsing fear, your emotions will echo fear. If your mind is filled with resentment, your emotions will harden. If your thoughts are lazy and undisciplined, your life will reflect that disorder. A person who never challenges their thinking will always be controlled by it. The world aggressively competes for your thoughts, not because it cares about your peace, but because whoever shapes your thinking shapes your life. You are constantly being taught what to value, what to fear, what to pursue, and what to dismiss. Much of this instruction is subtle, repeated so often that it feels natural. If you do not intentionally elevate your thinking, you will unconsciously absorb whatever is loudest and most convenient. This leads to a life driven by trends, approval, and immediate gratification, rather than conviction, wisdom, and purpose. A low level of thinking produces a life focused on comfort above character. When comfort becomes the highest good, sacrifice feels unreasonable, discipline feels cruel, and endurance feels unnecessary. People with small thoughts avoid anything that requires sustained effort or delayed reward. They abandon commitments when they become inconvenient. They define success by how easy life feels rather than by what kind of person they are becoming. Their lives may appear busy, but they are directionless, constantly moving yet never advancing. Your thoughts determine what you believe is possible. If you constantly think in terms of limitation, you will never attempt what requires courage. If your internal dialogue is filled with excuses, you will always find reasons to stay where you are. Many people call this realism, but it is often fear wearing a respectable disguise. Elevated thinking does not deny difficulty, but it refuses to let difficulty dictate destiny. It acknowledges weakness without surrendering to it. It recognizes that growth demands effort, discomfort, and perseverance. The mind is not neutral. It is either being disciplined or it is being degraded. Just as a field left unattended will grow weeds, a mind left undirected will drift toward distraction, indulgence, and passivity. You do not have to choose to think poorly. It happens automatically. But to think well, deeply, and truthfully requires effort. It requires choosing silence over noise, reflection over reaction, and truth over preference. A person who never learns to sit with difficult thoughts will never develop wisdom. What you think about success determines how you pursue it. If success in your mind is defined by recognition, you will compromise when no one is watching. If success is defined by comfort, you will quit when things become demanding. But if success is defined by faithfulness, integrity, and growth, you will endure seasons that others abandon. Elevated thinking reframes success from what you gain to what you become. This shift alone has the power to transform how you live daily. Your thought life also determines how you respond to failure. A shallow mind sees failure as an identity. A disciplined mind sees failure as information. Those who think poorly are crushed by mistakes, either sinking into shame or hardening into defensiveness. Those who think well examine themselves honestly, learn, adjust, and continue forward. Failure does not destroy them because their thoughts are anchored in truth rather than ego. You cannot rise while constantly comparing yourself to others. Comparison distorts thinking and poisons motivation. It either inflates pride or fuels insecurity, and both outcomes keep you small. When your thoughts are governed by comparison, your life becomes reactive rather than intentional. You measure your worth by someone else's progress, and your direction by someone else's approval. Elevated thinking frees you from this trap by focusing on responsibility rather than rivalry, calling rather than competition. The way you think about time reveals the level of your thinking. Those with low thoughts waste time because they assume there will always be more. They procrastinate, delay growth, and live as though consequences are distant. Elevated thinking understands the weight of time. It recognizes that days are not disposable and that habits compound. This awareness creates urgency, not panic, but purposeful living. It teaches you to invest your time rather than spend it carelessly. Your thoughts shape how you handle suffering. Without depth of thought, suffering feels meaningless and unfair, something to escape at all costs. This leads to bitterness or despair. But when thinking is elevated, suffering is examined rather than merely endured. It becomes a teacher rather than just an enemy. Pain exposes what comfort hides. It reveals what you trust, what you fear, and what you truly value. A person who thinks deeply does not waste suffering. A mind fixed only on the present moment will always choose immediate relief over long-term good. This is why discipline feels unbearable to many. They cannot see beyond today. Elevated thinking stretches the horizon of your mind. It trains you to endure now for the sake of what comes later. It allows you to say no to what is easy in order to say yes to what is meaningful. Without this perspective, life becomes a cycle of indulgence and regret. Your private thoughts matter more than your public image. What you repeatedly allow in secret will eventually surface in your actions. Integrity is not built in dramatic moments, but in quiet decisions of thought. A person who entertains dishonesty internally will eventually practice it outwardly. A person who excuses bitterness in thought will eventually express it in behavior. Elevated thinking demands honesty at the deepest level, where no one else can see. Many people underestimate how much their thinking has been shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of discomfort. Fear narrows the mind and limits vision. It trains you to avoid rather than pursue. Elevated thinking confronts fear with truth. It does not eliminate fear, but it refuses to let fear lead. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act according to conviction rather than emotion. If your thoughts are always centered on yourself, your life will remain small. Self-centered thinking magnifies problems, fuels entitlement, and drains gratitude. It interprets everything through the lens of personal comfort and recognition. Elevated thinking lifts your eyes beyond yourself. It asks how your life can serve something greater than your own desires. This shift brings meaning, resilience, and clarity that self-focus can never provide. You cannot elevate your life without elevating what you allow to shape your mind. What you read, watch, listen to, and dwell on is not neutral. It is forming you. A steady diet of triviality produces shallow thinking. Constant distraction weakens focus. Over time, this erosion becomes visible in the inability to endure difficulty or think clearly under pressure. Discipline in thought is not legalism, it is wisdom. Your life today is largely the result of yesterday's thinking, and tomorrow's life is already being formed by what you dwell on now. This reality is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It places responsibility where it belongs. You may not control every circumstance, but you do control what you meditate on, what you believe, and what you pursue. Elevation begins the moment you refuse to let your thoughts drift unchecked, and instead subject them to truth, discipline, and purpose.